Yeah?
Yeah.
My number one is Borderlands, the pre-sequel on Xbox 360. In the middle of the review process for this at the moment. And weirdly, I think I'm enjoying it more than the other two, but that's kind of a unique case with me, a guy who didn't massively get on with either of the other two, just their sprawling scope kind of got to me in the end, and I didn't have the opportunity to play either of them really on co-op, whereas this, it's actually made by 2K Australia as opposed to Gearbox themselves, and it feels like it's a more, well, I mean, I've been playing a good few hours now, and it feels like it works better on your own. Not better on your own, but better than the other games do on your own, if that makes any sense. It feels like it's less preoccupied with offering you the world and a billion different things you can go and do in big sprawling areas, even though there is that kind of, and more, it feels like you're not losing out just by playing through the story. And I'm actually really liking it so far. The action takes place on a moon, one of Pandora's moons, and the gag being that it's like our moon, the gravity's low, so you can jump really, really far, and so can the enemies, and you actually get a piece of kit very early on that allows you to kind of boost while you're jumping, and you can also press a button to slam down to the ground, like you're going to be able to in the new Call of Duty, but it's a lot more like Buzz Aldrin than COD. It's very slow and smooth, and the enemies are all sort of flying in from high and trying to do that stuff, and it just creates a kind of new style of combat for Borderlands, a game where I never thought the combat was that strong. That was certainly probably the weakest aspect of the other games, I thought, and it's better here. It's still, I mean, coming from Destiny, which is a very similar game in many ways, and has peerless combat, you know, it is a marked step down here. As much fun as it is still to shoot things and get all the loot, that remains intact. I've read things about the game that it's a bit lacking compared to Borderlands 2 in terms of new assets, just a kind of sense of new, but having not spent hours and hours on Borderlands 2, it's not something that's bothered me at all. And because it's made by 2K Australia, I must give Joe Screbbles from Erg7 credit for this, because his reviews pinned all around this fact. So I would have probably thought of it anyway, but I must give him credit. It's the entire game is basically completely Australian. I love the fact that they've done this. It's been made in Australia, so they've just decided that this moon, where the game takes place, is Australia. I mean, it doesn't look like Australia, but every fucker in it's Australian. So it's just a bunch of Aussies. Everybody's an Aussie, and it's not like English developers trying to do Australian accents, like I'm not going to attempt now. It's actual Aussies doing Aussie stuff and speaking. It sounds natural and good, and you know the humour's always decent in Borderlands. I don't think they're hilarious or anything, but there was, there's a sense that a kind of anarchic sense of humour here, and I actually think this is funnier than the other ones. It's way less grating to me. So yeah, it's a kind of weird, like it's fun. I mean, it's really starting to look a little dated in some ways now on the old tech. That art style is very low detail, and obviously you're dealing with the older consoles. It's not out on next gen. But then again, on the flip side of that, like the skyboxes on the moon, you can see the planet and shit like that. That all looks really cool, and things like that. There's some odd decisions, like when you're out in the open, you need oxygen, but you get this helmet that gives you like a bar of oxygen, and that depletes. And if you want to boost and stuff, it depletes further, and then you have to kind of run to areas where there's like little geysers that come out of the ground where you can recharge your oxygen. It's not been a problem yet, but it's kind of like a swimming level in some ways, and you have to go between bubbles in a swimming level. It's not as you can spend quite a long time without oxygen, without topping off, I should say, and it's not as urgent as like a Donkey Kong swimming level or something, but or Sonic swimming level, whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, that might end up proving irritating. It's already starting to get a little bit tiresome. It's kind of like, all right, it just seems like restricting fun for no reason. I don't really understand why they've chosen to do it. It doesn't add anything to the game. I think it only detracts. But it just seems like restricting fun for no reason. I don't really understand what it adds to the game. It's not a massive problem or anything like that. It really isn't. But it's just an odd one. But maybe if you stripped it out, I would miss it straight away. Like when you turn down that other game to easy, and suddenly you realise that you've lost so much. So who knows? And yeah, just overall, I think it's really solid. You know, it exists purely in many ways. It's just a box ticker. You know, they needed a Borderlands game because that series has become so successful, and they didn't want to wait until the next gen one that they're clearly obviously working on to come out, and however long that'll take. So it's just a stopgap. But for a stopgap, you know, it introduces entirely new mechanics, has a different flow to the combat than either of the games, and has its own personality. Like this kind of Aussie vibe to it, which is reasonably amusing. It's not a world beater. I wouldn't necessarily switch off Destiny if you're still really into that to move to this by any stretch. But I don't know, if you're Borderlands enough, and God knows there's enough of them. I think 2 did 10 million or something like that. I don't think you'll be massively disappointed, but there maybe you will, and maybe it's the guy that didn't really like the first 2 Borderlands that's getting on with this more streamlined one. So who knows?